I'm Jeremy Singer, president of the College Board, and this is the Education Equation. I've spent my career grappling with what truly drives student success. On this podcast, I'll talk with people who are researching, building, and scaling solutions that matter. Every episode will go beyond the hype and focus on data and evidence to see what's actually working. Let's stop guessing and let's figure out what works. My guest today is Ethan Mollick, one of the leading voices helping us understand what AI actually means for how we learn and how we work. He's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, where he studies how AI is reshaping everything from classrooms to careers. His book, Co-Intelligence, has quickly become a defining guide to engaging with AI, and his work has earned him recognition as one of Time's most influential people in artificial intelligence. Ethan is not just observing this shift, he's actually testing it. Through his work with leading generative AI labs at Wharton, he's exploring how these tools actually perform in real classrooms and real work settings. He also writes One Useful Thing, one of the most widely read newsletters on AI today. And if you don't subscribe, you should. Ethan Mollick, welcome to the Education Equation.
Thanks for having me.
So first things first, how do I confirm you are actually Ethan Mollick and not just an AI bot that he has created?
So the good thing is I'm answering quickly enough and speaking quickly enough that I think we're okay. But it's getting harder to tell. I don't think that is a thing you can promise that you can easily detect in the long term.
Okay, good. Because I planned a whole biometric screening, but I will save our listeners time. It doesn't make great podcast content. So I want us to warm up talking broadly about AI, not specific to education, but then we'll spend the majority of our conversation focused on education. You've been studying AI, as I noted, very closely for a number of years. I've heard a lot of people try to analogize AI to past innovations, whether it's the microchip or the internet. But it feels, at least to me, that the pace of AI development, at least in the past couple of years, is just so much faster. So how has your thinking evolved as the technology has improved so rapidly?
So I think that a lot of us who are following the technology closely have had some sense of where this is going, or maybe not where it's going, but where it's going to go next, right? I don't think anyone knows where all of this is heading. I warned about the homework apocalypse back right after ChatGPT came out, and it has unfortunately come to pass. What I actually find really interesting is that other people's thinking have finally evolved. I think this isn't a one-person problem, it's a many-person problem. But I think as the capabilities of these systems keep growing and we don't see sign of that slowdown that was always possible, we have to start preparing for a world where, if it's good at math, it's going to be very good at math. If it's good at coding, it's going to be very good at coding in a pretty rapid order. And I think that the capacity to change quickly, to change perspectives, to react quickly is becoming more important than ever.
Yeah, and I even saw, I think yesterday I read your latest One Useful Thing newsletter. You sort of said, hey, the newest releases, the pace is keep moving very quickly, which in some ways is a relief. But is there any belief that you had a couple of years ago that has dramatically changed, or has it been pretty consistent? You deserve some credit because I think you were onto this very early and generally right, which is a big reason we have you here today. But is there anything that has shifted that you've been surprised by?
This is going to sound very Pollyannish, but I think a lot of the sort of big negative effects that people were I thought deep fakes would have a bigger impact than they did right now. And I don't know if that's just our information environment so bad already. Also, I think I had a little bit of a too positive feeling that education would adjust more quickly, not systemically, but at the individual level around the idea that, okay, we've lost a category of assignments that are useful. There's a new form of work that is useful that wasn't useful before. I think the level of delay and the level of denial that the tools are as good as they are has been surprising to me. So I think on the positive side, I think that the negative effects in some areas have been less than I thought. In the others, I thought some of the people would be reacting. I'm surprised, in the education section, very diverse responses, but there's still a debate over whether AI is real or not, which is a frustrating one, I think.
Yeah, no, and I've seen, we'll talk more about it, but where people are hoping they can just bottle it up or exclude it and everything can be as it was pre-AI, which I think we probably agree is faulty. I've heard you say many times, and I love it, and I've now incorporated, is that today's AI is the worst AI we'll ever use. So if someone hears that, what does that imply for how people should be approaching engaging with AI?
I think it's easy to fix on where things are today. That's what we do, right? I don't like the COVID analogies because it's a very different experience, but in the same way, you can remember how you just could when something is coming and you see okay, there's a couple cases, it's hard for us to extrapolate where things might go. And I think that in the same kind of way, it's hard for us to say what happens if this keeps getting better? Because we don't really have a concept of that. So I see a lot of solutions planned for today's systems. I mean, it's interesting. The very first thing I went viral for in education was I put up after like a week after ChatGPT came up, I put up my new syllabus for my class, which said you can use AI in class. Right. But you're responsible for the output. And that was great with the original ChatGPT 3.5 because it made lots of mistakes. It was not very smart. But my students were better. It was instantly bad. Like it made stuff up. The writing was weird. And it was great for 4 months. And then GPT-4 came out, and now it is better than a lot of my students at writings. And that is an obsolete system. So there was this kind of like trailing, like staying ahead of this is hard that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And humans aren't very good at like exponential forecasting. At College Board, we have an academic assembly of a lot of different instructors at college and high school, and they were meeting in our office yesterday. So I spoke to them and I talked a little bit about what we're doing with AI. What I see a lot when I talk to people in education is a fear, like we haven't figured it out. We don't use it. One person talked, they were at a university, I won't name it, but they said they got everybody licenses, but only 5% of people were actually engaging with AI. And my take is there is a missed opportunity, but what I tried to say is it's going to just get more accessible every day. It's going to get easier to use. So I built this very simple app a year ago and it took a lot of work. Today, I can just describe it in Claude and it builds it. Like if someone feels late to the game, is it okay? Or what would you tell to them? Or what would you have told to this person?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. As time goes on, not every piece of advice in the book will be as strong as it was. But one of the pieces of advice I give is just like try it for everything, invite to the table that for everything that legally and ethically can. I think that putting off using AI until some future point where you have a weekend or a week free to do training, like it really is a hand feel thing. Like if you're good at working with people, which instructors are, you will be good at working with AI. And I think that getting started is a big deal. I do worry about the sort of social desirability bias issue. The AI is evil. I mean, there's a lot of bad things about AI. There's a lot of good things. In education, it will have strong negative effects and strong positive effects, but it's not going anywhere. Right. And like we can wish that it goes away, but like there is this worry I have. It's like I haven't used it. It's not that hard to use. Right. All of the tips and tricks, as you were alluding to, don't matter anymore. Like you don't have to do fancy code of, if you're good at describing what you want, which is what we do as instructors, if you're good at correcting errors and getting an intuitive sense of the errors you're facing, which we're good at in education, then you're probably going to be pretty good at using these systems.
I agree. Once you get in it, it's pretty intuitive and pretty easy, and it's just getting easier and easier. I want to turn the lens to education. The stakes there are obviously different. And I'm going to break our discussion into three big parts. So the first is around how AI is changing what students need to learn and what we should be teaching. The second is going to be, okay, now we've solved that. Teaching should evolve and change now that teachers and students have access to AI. And then finally, the third is how we should rethink how we assess, knowing the ubiquitous access to AI. So I'm going to start with what we teach, what students should learn. And here I'd say the reality, I would argue strongly that even prior to AI, the system, the K-12 higher ed, there were things that were taught that probably were not super useful for students to learn. And then there's some critical topics that we're missing, things like statistics, personal finance, many others. But regardless, with AI here, it's going to be impossible not to sort of reconsider what is in the corpus of K-12 and higher ed. And so in an AI world, what are things in your view that used to be covered and taught that either have become obsolete or just less important for students to learn?
So my controversial opinion on this is there are actually very few things that have become less important, right? I mean, I feel like part of how you keep up with AI is you need to have a basic understanding of and mastery on your own. Schooling is going to become even more important in a lot of ways because we need people to have the basics. And the only way we can enforce, monitor, assess
Yep.
and help people is like in a controlled classroom environment. Like it's going to be harder to do that in the real world than we did before because people will use AI and you won't know when they're using it or not. So, I mean, I think it shifts what we do. We have to decide the lines we want to draw, right? And math education in the 70s with the calculator is the canonical example. There was a chaos for a while, and then there was some decisions made that made math education much stronger about here's what you need to do by hand. And then once you have those basics, we can now go far beyond that because we have better tools and you can learn more advanced concepts. We're going to have to do the same sort of stuff in composition. There's going to be, we want people to learn to write and write well, and we're going to have to do that, enforce that the kind of way we did in the calculator world. People will be doing a lot more writing in class. There'll be more monitoring. Nobody wants it, but that's what's going to end up happening. But then those writing skills hopefully will go on much further, developing a sense of taste, reading more widely as well, learning different writing styles because you now have tools that can help you do it. So I don't think there's a basic shift in the things we want a well-rounded human being to know when they enter society. I think that it gives us a chance to consciously pick what we want to do and what we don't do. We dropped cursive writing. We're going to drop other pieces and evolve them. But I don't think this changes fundamentally. Just because Wikipedia knows history doesn't mean we don't want to teach people history, right?
Yeah.
And there's the usual fight for the space in the curriculum, right? So how much of, computer science gets taught? How much of financial literacy gets taught? Like those fights are still real, and in a coherent response, which we won't have, but if we had a coherent response to this, part of this would be rebalancing some of that education portfolio. And in some ways, things that we teach less of, appreciating poetry might end up being more important in a world where AI writing is ubiquitous, but having a sense of taste is not.
You use a calculator example. There's a lot of lessons to be learned, I think, in miniature. Like one is, though, there were things like the ability to do long division isn't taught the same way it was in the 70s. So there are some things where they said, hey, do you really need to know this? But there are some fundamental pieces, as you argue, like the multiplication table. You better know that rote. You can't be using working memory to figure out what 6 times 5 is. You need to know that because it enables all these other things. I still will push. I guess I agree with you that, maybe pre-K through 6 or whatever, that stuff are all fundamental. But I do wonder whether there's things in high school chemistry. I mean, we are looking at it, we haven't made changes, but with our AP classes of like, hey, is all this content, and it's more advanced content, how important is it for students to learn?
So it's a really complicated question. And I think there's really kind of AI as opportunity to make changes, right? Which is like we've been teaching the same thing the same way for a long time, and it lets us reassess changes that we might have made because the internet made things easy, right? One way or another. Like we give up these skills all the time. My grandfather built some of the launch pads at Cape Canaveral using a slide rule, and he spent his master's thesis was doing a single matrix multiplication effort, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't need. I don't know how to use a slide rule. We gave that up. That's okay. So part of this is crisis as opportunity, right? It gives us a chance to kind of rebuild curricula, right? And make decisions. That's what I like about the math example was there was conscious choice about what should be by rote, what it needs to be familiar with, what do you need to be expert at. And I think that is very useful as a crisis. And then I think the danger, is a little bit chasing AI, because when I talk to people about AI education, they say, oh, we need to teach people things AI can't do, like judgment. And AI can do judgment. Like, it's a pretty good judge. Like, it couldn't do the things it could do. Now, is it the same kind of judgment as humans? Should we be using the same term? Do we actually mean we want humans to control? Those are valid questions. But I worry that AI literacy becomes the target people aim for. Like, we'll add a class in AI literacy like we added internet literacy. This is very different. There's a fundamental reshaping of how people interact with the world around them. There's a general purpose tool in the way that calculators were general purpose for a particular kind of math problem. Now it's for everything. So to go back to your main question, yes, part of the problem though is I can't anticipate for you what that world looks like. So I can tell you that, like, if you understand basic chemistry, you'll know, you have some sense of checking the AI, but the AI is going to be better at chemistry than you. It's better at math than all of us right now, right? Like, there's statistically 0.001% of this audience is better at math than the best AI systems right now. So I agree that we have to rethink these things. I think the question just is more of a question of like, how do we almost use this to bootstrap ourselves to more advanced topics where you can thrive or learn or understand more? But it's always been the hard problem in education, right? You need the basics, which are rote and annoying to learn, to reach the next level of scaffolding, to scaffold that. And I don't know how you change that fundamentally. That's a real challenge.
Right. And I think about, like, even with GPS, how that's changed people learning there's still fundamentals you need to understand about directions and so forth, but there's a lot where you now turn it over to Waze or what have you. But so let me
for better
shift.
or for worse, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For better or for worse. So you touched on a couple things, but are there new skills or existing skills that become more important. I'll say the durable skills piece, and I love your view here. I think most of our listeners will have heard of these, but these are things like critical thinking, communication, problem solving, ethical decision making, and 30 plus US states, even before AI had created these portraits of graduate, were like, hey, these things are important. So these are things that have been threaded through education, whether explicitly or implicitly, forever. But then the question is, in the weighting of what students need to learn to succeed, do you see these as becoming a greater import or no?
So again, it's kind of hard, right? Because the education serves these many purposes, right? Is it preparing people for the career of work? Is it preparing people to be independent thinkers and citizens in society? Is it preparing people to, like there's a lot of open questions. There is a really fundamental existential challenge coming from AI, which is it does change how we place ourselves and what value we place in different kinds of intelligences and different kinds of approaches. And that's a bigger issue to grapple with. And it's hard for me right now to sort of say to you, like, this is what, like, those durable skills still seem durable, but they're also outsourceable to a degree they never were before, right? Judgment and critical thinking were never outsourceable, but now, like, there's enough studies that say the AI gives pretty good critical thinking. Like, it gives you pretty good answers on ethical situations that ethicists would agree with. It gives you pretty good, judgment calls on, and that will get better as it gets better over time. Do we want to outsource that? Probably not, but like,
Yeah.
we never had to ask the question before. So, I would add to those durable skills, though. I think taste is a thing that we actually want people to develop more of. And, I've talked to some writing teachers about this. I think it's kind of interesting that, having your unique style ends up being more interesting now in a world where if you go online, everything reads like Claude, right? Everything is like, let me sit for this for a little with this for a little bit. Or it's not just this, it's that. Like having a sense of style actually matters. When you're curating, it matters in these cases. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, right? I've been building entrepreneurial teaching tools for a very long time, even pre-AI. This has been a topic I care about. And something that we've always struggled with teaching is that sort of entrepreneurial agency. How do you take action, experiment, and learn while you do things? And that's another hard problem that I think will become more important. So agency and taste become important. So I do agree that these critical, sort of life skills become ever more important. But now we have to make choices about them in ways we didn't before, right? Is like, if you're bad at judgment, like, and you make bad decisions regularly, would it be better to have an AI help you make those decisions? How do you weigh in AI's decisions if you can now get decisions 4 or 5 different organizations or people? How do you make those integrate that into your life or not? These are questions we haven't had to ask before.
Yeah. It's funny, the sort of idea of creating, tastemakers, or the personality becomes more important, which is not just important at dinner parties, but potentially for a lot of things moving forward. So within this, you've written about how AI, raises whatever the task is, it raises the floor. So it's a good thing for people that are performing below that level, but at least in the past, has struggled to outperform like the experts in what that is. Can you share some of that? And is that changing? I mean, you just talked about the math example.
Yeah, I mean, so there's basically 4 ways that AI can affect skills. So it can act as a leveler. And that was the first results we found in our experiments
Yeah.
and stuff. You're a bad performer, AI makes you a good performer. The reason it does that is it just does the work for you, right? So from an education perspective, we like leveler is an important thing to think about in the outside world, right? Like if somebody who has a skill gap in one area or multiple areas, but is brilliant in some area, like that was not a good educational outcome. But maybe with a leveler setup, like, okay, so you can't do math, but you're really, really good at putting together an incredible argument better than any AI. Okay, well, the AI does the math for you. Suddenly it's a leveler. What do we do with that information is a question. Second option is that it's an elevator. It raises everybody up, right? Everybody gets better. There's some evidence for that as well, right? That doesn't change much about how we view the world. Just everybody performs better than they did before. Then there's some evidence emerging that this is a kind of a kingmaker, that there's some people who are just, the people who are very good get better. Right. If you already have good judgment and you're already good at using these
Yeah.
systems, you're now 100 times more productive and other people are 10 times. We haven't been able to measure that really well because there's a small set of percentage of people. We only are in the early days of doing that. But that implies a new form of inequality that we start to worry about a lot, which is
Yeah.
a few people get all the benefits of sort of AI use. And then there's the possibility that's even weirder, which is a really interesting one for education, which is that some people are just good at AI. And that's because just like if you were, if you're good at coding, there was huge returns to that in the 2010s. Being good at AI, whatever that means,
Right.
gives you huge returns. Now, the problem is good at AI doesn't seem to be a skill set. right? It's not that I can teach you 17 prompting skills and then you're good at AI. There's some other aspect that we don't fully get yet from early studies that is some people call theory of mind of the AI, that you understand how to work with these systems, but we don't really know. So those skill effects are going to be fairly profound. We already know the leveling effect is real, right? Like, and you know this because there's no longer bad essays when I grade students the way
Yeah.
there was before,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of essays that feel similar to each other,
Right.
to
Right.
varying degrees, but there's no longer bad essays, right? That level has happened. How do we feel about that? It's kind of a bigger question.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much here. I could go so many directions. It is interesting. I'd love to talk more about. We're all trying to discover, are there specific skills or approaches or natures or that lead someone to be better with AI? But it's interesting because I've seen people who are very detail controlled people. They approach AI very different than people who are willing to just iterate and make mistakes, and both can succeed. So at least it's not one persona so far. But let me go back to writing. You mentioned it earlier. You know, what we see, and you mentioned it with the homework apocalypse years ago, and we're seeing that in K-12 and higher ed, which is AI does a good enough job and getting better that a lot of students are outsourcing their writing assignments to AI. And there's a big problem with that, which is the way you build writing skills, and not just writing skills, but if you think about critical thinking or communication, and there's so much else that writing, as you know, you need to write to build these other set of skills, not just writing. And if you outsource it, you never do it. And we've already seen this decline by many young people. What's your thought on how do we ensure students engage in actual writing, don't outsource it for the good of them and for frankly the good of society?
So that's a change, right? I mean, in some ways we have to face this like math teachers did too, right? So
But math was easier. You said, hey, you can't bring a calculator in
right.
just to be
And
later.
so, I mean, there's some tech, maybe there's some degree of like, okay, we're going to have to need to have disconnected, dedicated type. I mean, I'm hearing some pretty crazy stories that I'm sure you're hearing too about the data, about trying to proctor things in a world where people's phones, which are ubiquitous tools in the bathroom, are good enough to answer all the questions for them, in a
Yeah.
6-second break, right? Like, let alone all the elaborate cheating mechanisms, let alone the glasses with things built into them.
We
This is your
administered
world.
12 million
Yeah.
high stakes exams last year, and we see shit that scares the hell. It would scare everybody if they saw the way.
I mean, Faraday cage testing, things with scanners. Like, I have no idea what the future holds. But fortunately,
And we'll get there when we get to the assessment side. But go ahead.
in classrooms, we have some sense, right? Of like, as a teacher, you have a sense of who knows stuff and who doesn't know stuff beyond the testing. It's not a surprise to you. It shouldn't be a surprise to you most of the time how things are doing. But I would say that it requires changes, and some of them are uncomfortable. Like, a lot of things we do in education worked well enough and are sort of unexamined, right? When you look at the empirical basis for how we teach essay writing, there isn't a lot there, right? We assign people, in an undergraduate class, we might assign people a 100-page essay, and we hope something magical happens while they're writing the essay, right? And every professor who teaches, right, had the magical thing happen, which is like, oh yeah, like I suddenly understood, like I synthesized it, and I was like in this writing like. So we keep hoping that magic happens, but we haven't really thought in a deep way, right? About some of these aspects of what we want writing assignments to do. And I think we're gonna have to start thinking more about how to break those into pieces. What we want to do in a classroom setting that's controlled. What we want to do outside of class where people might use AI, but makes the AI use uncomfortable hard. I use AI for all my class assignments. There are cases where the AI interviews them for questions, or they have to correct the AI's writing about a topic. So there are ways of being clever, but it is gains and losses. Like, I don't think anyone asked for our writing education system to be thrown into the air and have to be rebuilt from scratch, and that's what we are.
I agree. I think the science of reading finally has been more settled of how you teach reading, thankfully. But the science of writing is less at least less shared. If there is a student listening, make the case to them to hey, you could use AI. It's going to give you more time to hang out with friends or do sports or whatever. But you shouldn't when you're doing a writing assignment for your own good. Like, how are you going to convince them?
I mean, I will say I've never been perfect at convincing people to do this, even in a class where, I'm the AI person who everyone knows will use it, who can read AI writing, and I think we've all been in that kind of environment, right? I mean, it ends up sounding like the worst adult conversation in the world, which is like, you're only cheating yourself. And it's true. And that's the worst part. Like, the real problem, I spent 10 years building games for teaching, right? And the end result of all of that is, we can make things 80% fun. Like I can make learning 80% as fun as doing something that you actually enjoy, right? For a topic you don't enjoy. For the topics you love, great. You'll read the books, you'll do, but like there is not a way to get around the idea that education is effortful. And, difficulties might be desirable for us as educators. They are not desirable for the people who are living through them.
Yeah.
And it's hard because then you make a case of like, if you don't learn to write, you'll never get a job. But like, oh no, the AI will write for me. So in a world without intrinsic motivation to do this, right? Some people have intrinsic motivation, and I can appeal to their intrinsic motivation. As you, as a student listening, you should learn to write. It is it has made my life amazing, right? It's a differentiator for me. My students who can write well, they get better jobs, even in a world of AI. I can make that case to you. But the other case is, hey, we're going to grade you. And if you don't learn how to write, you're going to not do well on assignments. Like that is the other way to handle this.
Yeah. I mean, I interviewed Daniel Willingham at last pod, and it was interesting because, we talked about productive struggle and, you need friction to really learn. And yet it's just that AI has given a shortcut that has never been there. So simple, so easy, a shortcut across all these things about learning, practicing, assessing. And so I think it's hard to tell students just don't use it. But
so, like, we were deluding ourselves a little bit about how much students were engaged in productive struggle, right?
fair
I
enough.
think the best stat I saw is that 40,000 people in Kenya were employed full-time writing essays for people in the UK alone, according to the latest stats I saw before AI. Like, people were shortcutting work before. This is not new.
Right, fair enough. And I think people were cheating before and on tests, and it's not new, but it has made it just, you don't have to pay someone in Kenya now. I want to move on to the second topic, but I want one more thing here. So I'm just trying to put my shoes. I'm an instructional leader at a school district listening to our conversation. And we haven't even talked about, the jagged frontier, which is, it's odd that AI is super good at this, but not so good at that. But that isn't static. That stuff keeps changing. So you can't even if the jagged frontier was static, you could plan around it. Okay, I'm going to, but it's not. So what are you going to tell? I'm running curriculum for a decent sized district. What should I be doing? Should I be changing anything? Should I be waiting? Help them.
It's a hard question, right? Like, I mean, there is the magic wand kind of thing where I think there is not a single person who cares about education policy who doesn't have a magic wand list of things they'd wave. Their like, we should rebalance the classroom in this way. Like, you're saying like, chemistry and biology should be combined into a new biochem. Like, and we should have we should take 80% of this class and turn it into financial literacy. And like, we all have these things, right? Anyone who's been in education for a long time. So it's like, and I can't give you a magic wand because you're running a curriculum, like you have to, the tests that your organization offers, people are going to take those tests. They have to know what they're doing. There's requirements. I do think that the issue is that, so we've spent all this time talking about the negatives, and it's weird to have spent so much time talking about the negatives because the positives are also quite large. Like, this is as close to the universal tutor as we could imagine. Right? There are issues with the AI as a universal tutor, but they are vanishingly small compared to every other attempt we've done to do electronic tutoring or remote tutoring. And there's always access issues, there's always equity issues, but like, it's smaller gaps than we've ever seen in any of these kind of tools before. And the early evidence bears that out, right? And everyone's already adopting this. Like, we're pretending like this is a choice. It's not a choice. Your teachers are using this, your students are using this. So part of this is, let's give people models of ways to use this positively, right? And that doesn't have to be an ed tech solution. That could be, look, let's share some of the cases that are working really well. Let's build out a few AI educational efforts. Let's communicate to parents about how to use AI for tutoring by using learn modes. Like, I feel like we've, it's been a very negative podcast on this so far. It is worth
we're gonna
raising
get.
the
Sorry,
issue
I
that,
don't
like,
mean to be
positive
negative.
here. Yeah.
Sorry, and I just trying to
No,
get at.
you're not. I'm worried about the same things you're
yeah.
worried about. It's just there's a gains and losses problem happening here, right?
Yeah.
And we've been talking about the losses, which are very real losses. But like,
Well, I want to turn to let me turn, because I want to shift to, we've talked about what needs to be taught and does it change or not, and you got on with the tutoring, like how we teach. And I think here, And I'll say there's a million things. I talked to Jenny McGarrah from Google, and they have all this great research that teachers are already finding a lot of new time for instruction because they're lesson planning, great, all these things that they've used AI for, which is not only more effective, but it frees up all this time on tasks they didn't like. So there's a lot of examples of goodness here. Let's shift, and I'll give you a softball here. For decades in ed tech, we've all been chasing this idea of personalization, and I would argue, and I've heard you talk about largely failing at it. The idea is simple. Students are always going to be at different points of what they know and what they're ready to learn, and so if you could deliver specific to them in the moment they're at, that is no question better. But very few things have worked. So talk about how you see AI playing a role here as a positive factor.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the name. Like, I was at MIT during the trailing days of one laptop per child, but we thought like the internet would change everything. And, you know, we learned a lesson that way, just like the Wikipedia didn't change everything. Actually, it turns out education's complicated and just constructivist views where we airdrop laptops into villages and everyone learns to use them and becomes amazing coders. Like, it's complex. There's societal issues. There's teachers. There's parents. There's, not every learner's the same. And EdTech has been this sort of series of disappointments in a lot of ways, right? Of like, it doesn't deliver massive changes. And it turns out that there isn't really a 2 sigma gain that's easy to gain for anywhere. And everything does little things and not huge things, which is, a huge disappointment, right? Like, it would have been nice to have a dial that we could have dialed to make this happen. I think in some ways that has left us as instructors and as people who care about education, like cynical and gun shy, like yet another thing that's going to come in and save education that isn't. And in the end, there's us in the classrooms. I hate to say this. I think that in some ways AI is different. And that sounds like incredibly Pollyannish of me and naive, but the idea that you can get a multimodal tutor that is infinitely patient, that can explain concepts to people at an individual level, and that, by the way, the early research is showing very large scale improvements in pretty well constructed, not standard education policy studies. Like, there's some really good econometrically rigorous studies being done in Kenya. There's a really cool one that just came out of Taiwan by my colleagues at Wharton that are showing very large scale, for education, right? So, a third of a standard deviation, which is big, improvements in educational outcomes. And that's without putting a lot of effort into these tools. So I think that there's just a huge amount of upside in thinking about how do we use this for tutoring and how do we use this to close gaps. And to ignore that because we've had to deal with the downside risk, I feels like we're kind of turning our back a little bit and we're looking at the downside, but not the upside. And I have been surprised at the lack of effort to build the universal tutor. And by the way, at Wharton, we have been building and releasing prompts for tutoring where we keep releasing tutoring, like AI tools are all open source. They're all, Creative Commons. And I'm surprised at how few organizations seem to be taking up the torch of like, how do we use this positively to transform education? And the pieces seem to be there to make that happen.
Yeah, no, so I agree. And I think tutoring, and you referenced Bloom's 2 sigma problem, which is an older study that showed human tutors you get 2 sigma improved performance in the amount of time, the instructional time for students. There's a lot of debate if that tough to replicate, but whatever. There is no question that tutoring is, and I interviewed Liz Cohen, who wrote a whole book about tutoring, that tutoring is one of the few things in education. And this is my whole purpose in the podcast, like what actually works. Tutoring is one of the few things that has been demonstrated works. Now, not every tutoring model works, not every tutor works, but in general, it's one of the few things that has been replicated and scaled. And AI can potentially take this to, or not potentially, is and will take it to a whole nother level if we embrace it in the right way. Let me shift to another place, and I'll just play my cards. I'm bullish here too, which is the concept of flipped classroom. So for our listeners, this is where the typical structure of a classroom is inverted. A student engages with the content through video or online outside of the classroom. So when they were typically doing homework, and then the classroom time is used for interactive learning, such as discussions, problem solving. It's not new. Like personalized learning, it's been around, but it hasn't taken off. And I will say, my son, who's turning 25 next week, he had AP calculus as a senior in high school, so many years ago. And the teacher literally, they assigned a Khan Academy video each night that they had to watch, and then the day was working problems, and the class did pretty well. But this is more sporadic or isolated examples. So talk about how you see AI really enabling this thing, which again, I think most people would say is a good idea, but hasn't manifested well pre-AI.
I mean, so this is another one of those cases where if you ask where the data is good, tutoring, right, and active learning, with all the weird definitions of active learning, of which flipped classrooms are one real way of getting at this, right? So, like, you do your review outside of class, inside of class, your activities. I mean, work problems are one example, but this could be case studies, it could be debates, it could be built, projects, it could be the non-AI content that we were talking about here. And so, you make the classroom the non-AI space or the controlled AI space, and outside of class is everything else. I think this is the most powerful tool for that. Like, I absolutely believe that, like, we've known for a while, sage on the stage style lecturing in the middle of a class is not the right way to go. So the problem has always been, how do I get enough content? So my kids also were assigned Khan Academy videos outside, and
Yeah.
it was great that Sal Khan did this stuff. But like, it's weird again that was the best state of the art we had was, it was this narrow view. Now, again, we have this ability to do a multimodal tutor that can talk to you, that can look at your problems, that can give you feedback. The current models have weaknesses for this because they're trained to be helpful assistants. So if students just use them in an unsupervised setting, the AI gives them answers and they don't learn anything, right? But the study and learn modes seem to be much better. All of the AI models have a study and learn mode that makes the AI less willing to give you answers. And we could build, and we have built, and we're not the only ones, but we'll release a bunch of free stuff too. We're a research lab, but it's very easy to build tutors that are more resistant to, like, giving you the answer. So given that we can do that, it makes obvious sense that the long-term purpose is that your teaching is tracked and taught outside of class. And by the way, the AI is really good at giving teachers reports about what somebody needs to do. It's actually really good at saying, hey, based on where the class is, here's how I would adjust your activity for next time, or let me build the activity for you. So I think a teacher working in collaboration with an AI, where the AIs are also, where students have their own AI they're working with, and in that kind of controlled setting, flipped classrooms become the natural possibility. This teacher gets to do the active, engaging, learning stuff that they want to do inside the classroom. The gaps are filled in by AI outside of it, and that feels like a very natural equilibrium to reach that we're not at yet.
Yeah, no, I love it. Back in the early aughts, I was at McGraw-Hill and I was running a digital division for higher ed, and we were building a homework manager product, and we were trying to distill based on all the students' homework, what were the big takeaways for a teacher to go like, hey, the first 5 or 10 minutes of the class would reflect on the homework. And it's just so funny. It was not easy to do with static assignments, and now AI. I mean, wow. I wish I had that then. So this is great. I want to move to the last topic in a sec, but I'm going to throw out a couple things and let you cook for a minute. So, um, a couple things I've read of yours and seen is AI is good at task delegation by humans, particularly tasks that can be automated. You've written about how AI shifts, the shift we need to go is from it being a tool to teammate. So I want you to relate those concepts to what you would tell a teacher, and even using your examples of teaching at Wharton, like how do you do that? And, what will be the lesson learned?
So the most important thing we have early evidence on is that you want to use AI interactively, right? So teachers who go back and forth with the AI do better than those who just ask for output. So, like, part of what's great about this is, all teachers want more support, right? So, hey, I'm having trouble getting this concept across. How do we do this? Give me 12 ways to do this. I like number 2, but I don't think 3 would fly in my classroom for this reason. Could you give me some other examples on that? Okay, that's good, but I feel like this is like that interaction. First of all, you feel better because you've got a kind of intellectual partner to work with on your ideas. But second, the teachers who use that, according to small qualitative studies, have much bigger impacts on the quality of their teaching, the quality of how they feel about it, their free time. So I'd encourage to, like, it's tough because there's lots of things to criticize about AI, and I want to acknowledge those things, but it's also here, and most teachers are using this. And if you use it well, you will have a better outcome. So very simple things. Unfortunately, unless your district has to pay for it, or you're going down, unfortunately, have to pay $20 a month. There is not really a solution
Right.
to using one of the paid models, right? And you're going to want to pick, like, there's all kinds of weird providers out there, but you're really going to want to pick ChatGPT or Anthropic or maybe Google's Gemini, and that's it. There might be other like, but those are the ones. You're going to want to pick the thinking models for each of those, which, sometimes require you to click a couple buttons. And then they're smart, and you're going to have and they're capable of, like, drawing diagrams and having discussions with you. So it is that interaction. I think the more you could just talk to it like a person, the better off you are as initial output. And you're a teacher. You have a good theory of mind for people. You understand what they get and what they don't get. You understand when they're faking it or not. All of that will be very useful to you in those kind of interactions. And then push it, try different things. Like, hey, how do I reconstruct this assignment? This doesn't feel like it's going to connect to people. The Eagles just won the playoffs. Like, how do I make this connect in some useful way? Like, I'm having issues with this kind of a student. Like, we find that seems to create value. The Walton Family Foundation survey seems to suggest that the teachers who use this a lot are getting back 6 or 7 hours, a week, at the maximum end. Like, we only have the data. That's kind of what I do, is engage with a good model and engage it back and forth.
Yeah, no, and I think for listeners, just broadly, the good advice, just generally using AI is don't just take the first set of output, engage with it is useful strategy as well. All right. So we talked about what should be taught, should it change, how teaching should change. And the last piece is in this world, and maybe the hardest question is how do we assess learning? We are seeing that AI enables students to produce high quality work without actually understanding the material. We talked a bit earlier, but I'd like to go back. You talked about the homework apocalypse. For lower stakes things, what are you advising? What do you do? What do you do in your class? What else can we do?
I have to do a lot, like a much more low stakes in class assessment. I mean, we talked about two things that always work, right? Active learning works and tutoring works. The third pillar that works, right, is low stakes testing. Low stakes testing is good for everything, right? It has educational benefits. I mean, people don't like it, right? But that is one of the cleanest pieces of research that we have. And that's how you assess people. Like, you need more low stakes kind of tests without a phone or computer nearby. They can be micro quizzes. I like little micro assignments of different kinds. Here's a micro case study to solve, classroom discussion kind of interactions. But the assessment has to be in a controlled classroom environment. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a small classroom size and have discussion be something you can grade and stuff like that, actually AI can help with that. That can be useful. But I think we have to realize that the take-home assignment without very elaborate controls is going to be AI influenced. And the only people you're catching are the people who are not good at using AI. And the people who are good at using AI do not read like AI writing. They can fool almost all the AI detectors on a regular basis, or they're just getting AI influence one way or another. So we have to go back to more in class. I don't see a way around that.
Yeah. At College Board, we're working on a bunch of stuff, and I won't go through it all, but it is interesting. I do want to double down on. I think there's claims by some that there's AI detectors, and it's just like I think it's a joke. Like it's easier and easier to create. You could tell AI to create something in your voice, load some stuff. You can then launder it through two other LLMs. So I think that's a false.
And it's a race you're going to lose in the long run. I mean, there's,
No question.
of the detectors out there, Pangram has at least low false positive rates, but like it doesn't catch, it also has high, a very high false negative rates. As you said, people can launder this set of stuff, and it's also a running battle, right? And it's not that hard to fool the detectors. So you can't rely on detectors. And oh, by the way, the number 3 use people put AI to in classroom surveys is asking the AI whether something was written by AI. The AI will never know. In fact, in early stages of GPT-4, we know more recent ones, 95% of the time it says that something was AI written that wasn't because it wants to make you happy. So that doesn't work either.
I'm with you on that. And back to the positive piece here of AI. So for College Board, we've traditionally had two instruments, two tools in our assessment inventory, a free response question and multiple choice. And what AI has provided now is a couple things, and I think well, is one is sort of a Socratic bot where it can be interactive with a student. And so when I was interviewing for management consulting, I was giving case studies, and it wasn't like there's a right answer, it was how you problem solve. And so we can do that with students and try to sort of assess things that you couldn't assess in a multiple choice or free response. And then also we've built simulations where a student's interacting with multiple, other quote unquote students and seeing how they interact with them and so forth. So I'm very excited about these of expanding our ability to assess new things. Again, it has to be done in a securely and so forth. How do you see these, and what else do you see from an AI, from an assessment standpoint of opening new opportunities?
I've been building simulations for years. I think that we have a whole bunch of techniques that we knew would be good for assessment and teaching, right? Discussions and simulations
Yeah.
and case experiences, creative projects, stuff that was just hard to grade, hard to scale. And part of what makes this exciting, this is now an exciting thing that we can start to do. So I think that part of this is realizing wow, a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't possible is possible. Like I know, professors of history who built simulations of the Black Plague, and then
Yeah,
students go
unbelievable.
through and write about their experience. Like we can do cool stuff now. And I think there's a degree of like, if we just view this as a retreat from the kinds of assessment we knew, we're in bad shape. But like, there's some exciting new stuff that we can do as well at scale. And by the way, the evidence is these models are pretty good at grading with a little bit of help and scaffolding. Like they give good human kind of grade. They give better feedback than people in most studies that we have. Like, you know, and I mean, I know there's a lot of people listening who are like, that is not true. They make stuff up all the time. I will again go to what I said before, which is they used to, right? It's not like they're error free right now, but I promise you that if you use a more recent model, you're not going to be finding these kind of problems anymore where it's like making up citations and doing,
Yeah.
if you're using the thinking models. So I think that
And
this,
thinking model, not say custom instructions, like people need to know that you put custom instructions like, hey, verify, etc. I've had bad
yeah,
experience, but once I did that, it's been much better.
and a lot of that has closed as the models themselves just incorporate those things on their own. But what I'm saying is this is a really an exciting opportunity. Like simulations, are a really interesting way to do assessment, right? You live through it, solve the problem. I mean, we've been playing with things like advise Hamlet on what to do, and
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
great.
interesting because that's different in a psych course than it is in an English literature course. And you start to see like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to start having projects that really actually cross boundaries across parts of of the teaching curriculum. So I'd love more instructors to think about this as opening up the frontier of what we can do. Losses come with gains, right? But both
Yep.
things are true.
I well said and agree 100%. I love the Hamlet reference, but I want to respect your time. So I have two last things. So one is I ask all my guests a series of rapid fire questions to get to know you better. There's no right answer. Four questions. First is, what's one education buzzword you wish we could retire?
By the way, there's nothing more ominous than the person who does all the testing saying there's no right answer. Here's multiple choice question. I don't believe you for a second.
We will judge. I didn't say we wouldn't judge, but
I worry a lot about it's only emerging now, but like AI literacy being a single topic because I think AI integrates into many things that we do. And I think I worry that kind of putting into a box is going to end up resulting in pretty bad AI education, especially because what AI literacy is changing.
yeah, it changes so rapidly. It's a hard thing. What's your favorite book about education or one that shaped your thinking?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've read a lot. Okay, so I am a person who builds games for learning and tools
Yeah.
for learning. And I would be it's the most cheesy possible answer, right? And it's a terrible educational tool, but a lot of my career has been sort of shaped by Diamond Age and Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, right? Like everything's wrong with that kind of approach of like the custom tutor that tutors you, but like it's also clearly what the future should be, even though every part of that was pedagogically wrong and it was actually social commentary. But that idea of a universal tutor that turns things into stories and games and reaches you at your level and gives you empathy, like how can that not be every teacher's goal?
All right, I love it. A lot of people are probably going to look this up right away. One thing that makes you bullish for future learners, and we hit a lot, but just give me one.
I think there's never been a better time for learners to pursue the things that interest them and get answers to questions. Like, it's funny. We talk about how the internet didn't budge the needle as much as you think it would for education, right? I think we thought in the late 90s that you give people access to every piece of information ever written and everyone will become educated. Turns out it's a harder problem than we thought about, right? Like, who go figure. But I am bullish now that having something that can explain things to you at your level, like we're already seeing, for example, that AI bots online are actually moderate political extremism because it has a kind of moderating view. There's bad parts of that too, but like the idea that I could go ask questions and get reasonably good answers when a world of information pollution is very exciting to me.
Yeah, I agreed. Last rapid question. One class you wish all students had to take?
So I actually think that
And I know it's not AI literacy, so
right. And, I by the way, I teach entrepreneurship. So everyone has their bugbear of like, we should be teaching entrepreneurship more. And I think we should. But I mean, I actually really think that a real literature class, right, where you're reading bits of different kinds of I think that there's value in developing a sense of taste. So any of the humanities taste classes, it can be a poetry class, it can be an art history class, it can be an architecture class, but something where you're forced to learn how to be a critic and assess what something is good or bad based on subjective criteria, I think is a really important thing to do in this day and age.
you could have done me a solid and listed AP Lit as an example, but it's okay.
AP
I'm not
Lit being the
going
number one, sorry, yes.
to. I'm just kidding. All right. So, last question. So, ultimately, all this is about how do we improve educational outcomes? Let's imagine we're back on this 3 years from now, reflecting on positive change in education as it relates to AI. What would make you most excited, or in this dream scenario, what would have happened?
So what would have happened would be some larger scale education focused organizations, whether that's, and I know you're doing this in College Board, but also I'd like to see state governments, national governments around the world, nonprofits invest seriously in trying to build the thing that will actually help transform education and make it available widely and, deal with some of the issues of diverse access and everything else. Right. But I'd like to point to a thing and say, yes, every kid, who is struggling uses this thing. And, we have evidence that it helps them do stuff. And I don't think it's an unrealistic thing to believe. I would love to hear that the AI labs themselves continue to take education seriously and have advanced learning modes that continue to exist in their products as they move forward. I would love us to be able to share dozens of use cases of teachers who obviously are semi well known for this, like have developed really cool teaching approaches that other people have copied using these AI systems. So 1,000 flowers blooming, even as we see these sort of large scale efforts underway. I'd like to see us be critical, continue to be critical about AI and its influence on how we think as people, and that we as educators, our job now is to help make decisions about what people should know in a world where the job is no longer the educating tool in the world, but it has to be us. And that the changing role of education is something we're acknowledging and is happening. And so I think that I'd like us the debate to be more vibrant in 3 years than it is today.
I love all of that. I think we're on a big ride, and it's really important that we stay engaged and figure out how do we maximize the positive impact and how we mitigate risks that it introduces. Conversation has been great, Ethan. Again, you don't need more promotion, but I loved Co-Intelligence. I read it more recently, and it didn't feel dated, even with the pace of change. So much resonates and so much of what we discussed. One useful thing is my favorite email I get when you put it out. So thank you so much for spending the time. Thank you for all the work you are doing, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was a really good conversation.
Thanks for tuning in today. Join the conversation by following the education equation wherever you listen to podcasts.